Welcome to this edition of Project Natter. If this is your first time here, please show your support for freedom of speech by hitting the subscribe button. This is Stop the Boats Part 3, and joining me in this video is London-based activist and former UKIP leader, Richard BRAINE. Hello Richard, how are we doing?
Hi David, good to see you again. Always a pleasure to chat to you.
Thanks for coming on. So we just want to touch on these boats that have been coming over from France. So we know now roughly there's over 1,000 people have arrived since lockdown. We've seen a video recently with Nigel Farage on a boat showing the scale of this problem with these dinghies coming over, and they're actually being escorted over by the French border force and then handed over to UK border force and then brought into the mainland. I mean, they call it search and rescue, but I call it a taxi service. What do you make of it?
Well, the first thing is that I suppose you can expect it, because after our Brexit vote and disappointing the imperialists on the continent by opting out of this terrible totalitarian system that they've dreamed up, I think you can expect some considerable hostility, if not from the wonderful French people. Certainly, you can expect some pretty silly business from the authorities, government, and so on. And we've seen that over the last few years since the Brexit vote. All kinds of nonsense spoken by people like Macron and people in the EU as well. So I think that we can expect this kind of thing, and that's why. I mean, years ago, I said one of the most important things we could do after the Brexit vote is actually start rebuilding our maritime presence. And that means our Navy, our Coast Guard, and our fishing. And we've got a great tradition of shipbuilding in this country. And these are very worthy candidates for a real push by government. Spending £100 billion on HS2 is an absurdity. A lot of that money could do a lot of good promoting actual shipbuilding and the regrowth of fishing, the Coast Guard, the Navy. Sorry about that, someone's slamming a door. The Navy, and actually trying to start to rebuild our presence in our own waters, policing them and making sure that people aren't able to smuggle into Britain anything, including, of course, people, which is what's happening in this case. In the Mediterranean, I believe that it's a $30 billion a year business or more. This is not refugees, desperately in need of help. These are economic migrants, and some number of them certainly will be people with quite hostile attitudes to this country, to European traditions, and to our way of life. So it's been a disaster in the Mediterranean, allowing thousands of people come in, and we must not let it happen in the Channel. Nigel Farage is absolutely right to be out there drawing attention to this, and it's disgusting that our press can't be bothered. And it's not that they can't be bothered. They are deliberately hiding these matters from the British people, as they have been doing for the last 30, 40 years, actually not telling the truth about the real costs of mass immigration. The UN wants countries to allow it. We've seen the signing by Theresa May of the UN Global Compact on immigration, Marrakesh, at the end of, I think it was end of 2018, wasn't it? Correct me on that. But that document expresses the intention that this country believes that everybody in the world has a right to migrate here. That's an absurdity. There are 3.5 billion people in the world who earn less than £2 a day. Even if 1% of them wanted to come here, that would be 30 million people. England at least is the fourth most crowded country in the world, and we simply can't afford it. Our infrastructure is creaking. We're struggling with debt. We've got all kinds of problems to solve. The idea that we can somehow solve the migration problems of the world by throwing open our borders is an absurdity. So well done, Nigel Farage, for getting out there and drawing attention to this. And everybody should be very concerned about this. Write to your MP about this matter and express it to your MP that you do not actually agree with this country simply having open borders and allowing absolutely anybody to just come here illegally because they want to, for the sake of a cushier life.
Well, when you look at the scale of it, you're spot on there with the numbers and that. I don't know if you've seen, there was Migration Watch UK. I was checking them out yesterday, and they released, they published some figures that were released by the Home Office. And it shows that 51,906 cases of asylum are pending.
Yeah,
so to get your head around that on a scale of size, that's almost the same size as the population of the Isle of Man.
yeah.
You know, also in 2019, we've seen a record number where it's the second highest on record that we've had migration coming into the UK, which was 677,000 people. So to get your head around that on a rough scale is basically the size of Bristol and Cambridge populations together.
Yeah, that's each year, and it's been like that for quite a while. The Tories promised in 2010 that they were going to reduce immigration to the tens of thousands, and you know, they used that vague term so that they could actually mean hundreds of thousands. And they've actually been in charge of record levels of immigration. They're doing nothing about it. I don't believe anything that they say about any intention they claim to have about getting our borders under control and getting migration under control. I don't believe them. They I think that they have a plan to continually increase the population of this country so that it makes the powers that be feel more important. They've got a kind of Ponzi scheme attitude to the economy. They think if you keep bringing in more and more workers, the economy grows, then you can service your debt on that basis, which is an absurdity. And Labour, of course, support it because they think that immigrants generally vote Labour, and so they're just gerrymandering. And of course, the Tories are in bed with big business, and the big business loves having the cheapest possible wages and the maximum profits for their own benefit, which of course they use as they swan off around the world, the executive class, the traitor class in this country, and they swan off around the world, and they just don't care. They're like locusts. They don't care what it's actually like to live on the streets, to live in a coastal town where, you know, there's not a lot of employment and you're having to deal with some of the problems that ordinary people in Britain have to deal with.
But this all comes down to quality of life as well. Do you know what I mean? Where are all these people going to go? You see the transport at a minute. If you go to get on a tube, it's jam packed. Same with your buses, your schools. And funny you touched on the Labour Party there, because I was just going to mention there was a Labour MP, Rachel Mascow, I think her name is. She's a Labour MP for York. There's a video, I'm going to attach it to the end of this video. And she's talking on, bringing in refugees, and she's saying that, we should continue bringing them in until we're literally saturated. What does it matter if you have to wait an extra 2 weeks to get a doctor's appointment, or can't get your kids into the schools that you want? What does it matter? So this is the attitude that these politicians have towards immigration. It's shocking.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're just brainwashed, and they really think that sinking the lifeboat is the right way to set an example to the world of how to run a free and fair and open democracy. It isn't. You need to inspire other countries actually to solve their own problems. And we of course, by having this terrible immigration policy, are actually stealing the brightest and best from countries all over the world who desperately need those energetic and able people to, improve life there. And we know that works because the history of the last 200 years since Thomas Malthus made his totally now discredited and disproven predictions is that the places around the world where we tried to introduce democracy, education, sanitation, law and order, many of them have been transformed for the better in the most incredible way. And you look at India, you look at go to Singapore, go to Sydney, go to there's countries all over the world, there's cities all over the world that have benefited from this idea of setting an example. It wasn't migration from those countries that brought them to a better standard of living, lower infant mortality rates, less disease, more prosperity. It was that you actually set an example as a country by organizing your own affairs properly and finding systems, developing systems that help you to live efficiently and well and in the best interests of all of your people. And that's another point that's really missed here, is that government is supposed to represent the interests of the people in the country that it governs. It's supposed to represent the interests of the voters. Whereas these days, we've got governments generally obsessed with their international status and their global virtue. And they want to go swanning around solving the problems of the world without actually looking at some of the terrible things happening in their own backyards. And we've got plenty of problems in this country to deal with. So many of them have actually arisen as a result of excess levels of migration. But we need to get back to governments realizing that you have to represent your own, you have to act in the interest of your own country first. I liken this concept to when you're on an airplane, you read the safety instructions, and it points out that there is no point trying to help the person next to you when the oxygen masks come down. You need to put your own mask on first, and then you'll stay conscious. And if you stay conscious, you can help the people around you. But we've gone way beyond that, and we've got a sort of pretensions of grandeur where we're sending aid money to countries like India, which have a space program and a Mars program and so on. And we're actually not performing ourselves, and we are declining rapidly as a nation because our politicians are too interested in swanning around and not fixing the problems at home.
So I'm hoping Nigel Farage is going to push forward now with this Reform Party. Not that it will get anywhere, but he seems like the Brexit Party seems to be more of like a pressure group. Same with UKIP, pressuring the government to get the referendum. So I'm hoping now we can apply some pressure on, because we need to be more proactive rather than reactive. Get some measures in place. Like in Australia, for instance, they've got a clear and simple message there. If you come by boat, you won't settle there. It's quite simple. Yeah. And we need to do the same here, start making an example and dragging these boats back and sending them back to France. That's my personal opinion. What do you reckon? What would be your take on it? How would you tackle this problem?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. The way to tackle it is to stop the flow of people across the Channel, just as it is to stop the flow of people across the Mediterranean. It's not just about the risk to those people, which is significant. It's also about they're coming from France. Are we supposed to seriously entertain the idea that they are refugees from the failed state of France? Perhaps people do think that, but I don't really believe that. I think France is a fantastic first world country, and we have a lot to admire in France and the French, and there's no reason why we should imagine that refugees need to come here from France or Holland or Belgium, for that matter. So yes, we need to actually start policing it, and that means we need to actually build the boats and ships that can actually be out there in the Channel and turn them back and say, no, you can't cross this border. This is a border, and we are going to police it, and you will not be able to illegally enter our country. So it is about spending some money on improving our ability to defend these encroachments, which unfortunately it looks like the French Navy is helping with. And I think you can expect the French Navy and other European authorities to carry on continuing in this boorish way, which is what one expects from the European Union after its pride has been dented by our great thrust for freedom in this country. So yeah, we need to get very active. I think Nigel Farage is doing a good job drawing attention to this. And we need to regain the ability to police our own borders. There's always been smuggling. There always will be smuggling. But, this country has done probably as much or more than any other country in the world but through our maritime power, in fact, to stop the slave trade, to make free, global trade safe for shipping. We really transformed the world in that regard. If you go back 300-400 years, it was very, very dangerous out there. And today we have this extraordinary world where ships can pass around all over the world with every kind of goods that is produced, and people are free to trade in that way. So So, you know, we should be proud of that history, and we need to actually devote some of those resources, instead of wasting 100 billion on HS2. Let's build some Coast Guard and Navy frigates and actually start policing and smaller boats and think about it more cleverly than just an old-fashioned way. You know, it's also to do with monitoring and technology. But it is possible to get control of borders and to monitor them and control them and ensure that people don't illegally cross them without any documentation and without going through the right procedures of applying for a visa. Well, one thing I would recommend to people viewing it, there's a fantastic video online of a professor talking about whether you can solve the world's poverty and population problems. And he demonstrates the scale of the flow of migration using gumballs in glass jars. And I can't remember his name, but you'll find it on YouTube. If you look at gumball immigration, to those two keywords, you'll almost certainly find it. And he points out with the demonstration that, you know, the idea that we're somehow saving the world through immigration, it really is nonsense. The actual numbers of people coming into this country and into the West are so tiny that in the meantime, in the third world, you know, millions, you know, 10 or 100-fold are born, and the world's population is growing at that rate. So immigration can't solve the world's poverty problems and population problems. The only way that the point he makes absolutely clearly is that if you want to help people from other countries who come from a poorer world than you, then we have to help them where they are, because poor people in the world don't have the $3,000 to give to a people smuggler to get him across the Channel or to get him across the Mediterranean. They don't have that $3,000 or $10,000 or whatever it costs. The poor people of the world, the genuine refugees, the people that you would like to help, you're going to have to find a way of helping them where they are. That's it. And so there's a great illusion about how much good in the grand scheme of things is really done by immigration. And as I said before, the danger is that we will sink the lifeboats. We will by having excessive and too rapid immigration, we will end up with very few examples in the world of genuinely successful, efficient, free, democratic societies that people want to migrate to. And that, of course, would be a disaster.
It would indeed. Let us know your thoughts. Comment below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thanks very much for your time, Richard. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks a lot, David. Always a pleasure talking to you. We should have had more jokes this time. Not enough jokes. I'll tell you, I've got some terrible jokes. I'll tell you them afterwards.
Yeah, all right.
We need to shout so much more and say 20,000 is not enough, 30,000 is not enough. Saturation point, because what does it matter if we have to wait another week for a hospital visit, or if our class sizes are slightly bigger, or if our city is slightly fuller? What does it matter if things are slightly more challenging, if we have to pay a little bit more into the system? Surely it is worth it to see those lives being restored again, and surely